Jake Martinez wiped the sweat from his forehead as he stepped out of the training simulator. The machine had just thrown him into a combat scenario, with 3 armed pirates attacking a civilian transport. It took him exactly 4 minutes to neutralize all threats and secure the area. Around him, other cadets were still struggling with their own simulations. "Another perfect score, Martinez," Katie Burns called out from across the training bay. She was his squad mate and one of the few other humans at the Galactic Military Academy. "You make this stuff look easy." Jake shrugged and grabbed his water bottle. "It's not that hard, just stay calm and think it through," Instructor Veltar observed from his elevated platform, his reptilian eyes fixed on the human cadets. The Zenthari warrior stood nearly 8 feet tall, his scaled skin a deep green color that shifted darker when he was annoyed. Right now, those scales were definitely getting darker. "Easy?" Veltar's voice carried across the training bay, causing several alien cadets to freeze mid-exercise. "Perhaps you humans need a more challenging lesson." The other species in the class showed proper respect when Veltar spoke. The bird-like Avirians would ruffle their feathers and lower their heads. The insectoid hive minds would click their mandibles in submission. Even the proud crystalline beings would dim their inner light as a sign of deference. But the humans, they just looked at him and waited for instructions. This had been bothering Veltar for months. He was a decorated warrior from the Zenthari Empire, a species known throughout the galaxy for their military prowess. He had fought in 12 campaigns and earned the respect of warriors from dozens of worlds. Yet these soft-skinned primates from a backwater planet called Earth seemed completely unimpressed by his reputation. "Tomorrow," Veltar announced, his voice carrying the authority of command, "we will have a special advanced exercise. I want all cadets present at 800 hours in Training Bay 7. The alien cadets exchanged nervous glances. Training Bay 7 was the largest facility on the station, usually reserved for the most dangerous scenarios. Jake simply nodded and started gathering his gear. "What do you think he's planning?" Katie asked quietly as they walked toward the dormitories. "Probably something meant to scare us," Jake replied. He had grown up on a cattle ranch in Montana, dealing with 2,000-pound bulls, mountain lions, and the occasional black bear that wandered too close to the property. The idea that some alien instructor thought he could frighten a bunch of ranch kids seemed almost funny. That evening, Veltar made his way to the Academy's exotic creature containment facility. The facility manager, a nervous Flixian named Piptar, greeted him with obvious anxiety. "Instructor Veltar, how can we assist you?" Piptar's translator made his squeaky voice sound even more worried than usual. "I need something for a training exercise," Veltar explained, his yellow eyes gleaming. "Something that will teach my human cadets about real danger." Piptar pulled up the facility's inventory on his holographic display. "We have several options. Perhaps a Rigelian shock serpent? Their electrical discharge can stun most species into submission." "Too weak," Veltar dismissed. These humans shrugged off a level 7 pain simulator like it was nothing. A Centaurian acid spitter? Their toxins cause severe disorientation and fear responses in most mammals. Still not impressive enough. Veltar studied the list carefully. "What about something from the restricted section?" Piptar's small eyes went wide. "Sir, those creatures are classified as extremely dangerous. They're only used for advanced research, never for training." "Perfect." Veltar pointed to an entry that made Piptar's fur stand on end. "That one. The Corvin Shadowstalker." "Sir, that's impossible. Shadowstalkers are apex predators from one of the galaxy's most dangerous deathworlds. They have psychic intimidation abilities that can cause heart failure in most species. The last time we attempted to use one for demonstration purposes, 3 researchers had to be hospitalized for psychological trauma." Veltar's scales shifted to a satisfied dark green. "Excellent. Arrange for it to be transported to training. Bay 7 tomorrow morning. I want it secured but visible to the cadets. Sir, I must protest. The humans may be tough for a mammalian species, but they're still soft tissue biologicals. The psychic pressure alone could cause permanent mental damage." "That's the point," Veltar replied coldly. "These arrogant primitives think they understand danger because they survived on some backwards planet. Tomorrow, they learn what true predators look like. Piptar reluctantly began the paperwork, muttering prayers in his native language. He had never been more certain that he was making a terrible mistake. Meanwhile, Jake was in the common area with several other human cadets. Commander Roth, the human liaison officer, was sharing stories from her early days in space. "The thing you have to understand," she was telling a group of fascinated alien cadets, "is that humans evolved differently from most species. We weren't prey animals hiding in burrows or tree-dwelling creatures avoiding ground predators." "What were you, then?" asked a young Avirian cadet, his feathers ruffling with curiosity. "Persistence hunters," Roth explained. "We chased our food until it collapsed from exhaustion, and we formed packs with other predators. On Earth, humans live alongside creatures that would terrify most galactic species." "Like what?" The Avirian leaned forward eagerly. Katie laughed. "My grandmother had a pet wolf hybrid. My cousin raises crocodiles for fun. Jake here grew up wrestling cattle that weigh more than most shuttlecraft." The alien cadets stared in amazement. Several of them made notes on their personal data pads, as if documenting some incredible scientific discovery. "The point is," Commander Roth continued, "humans don't really have the same fear responses as other species. What looks dangerous to you might just look interesting to us." Jake nodded absently, thinking about the next day's exercise. Whatever Veltar had planned, it was probably meant to be scary. But Jake had been dealing with unpredictable, potentially lethal animals his whole life. His father had always taught him that fear was just information, and the key was staying calm and thinking clearly. "Besides," Jake added, "most dangerous animals aren't really mean. They're just trying to survive, same as everyone else. Once you understand what they want and what they're afraid of, you can usually work something out." The alien cadets looked at each other in confusion. The idea of working something out with a dangerous predator was completely foreign to their way of thinking. In their cultures, dangerous meant dangerous. You avoided it, you fought it, or you died. None of them could imagine simply walking up to a deadly creature and trying to have a conversation with it. But then again, none of them were human. Training Bay 7 buzzed with nervous energy as cadets filed in for the morning exercise. The massive chamber could hold 300 students comfortably, but today, only 50 were present. Jake noticed that several of the usual participants were missing, including most of the more nervous species. "Where is everyone?" Katie asked, looking around at the half-empty space. "Word got around that Veltar requested something from the restricted containment facility," whispered a crystalline cadet, their inner light flickering with anxiety. "Smart beings are finding excuses to be elsewhere." Jake shrugged and found his usual spot near the front. He had always preferred to see what was happening rather than hiding in the back. Around him, the alien cadets clustered together in small groups, their various forms of body language all showing the same thing: fear. The Avirians had their feathers pressed flat against their bodies. The hive mind representatives were making clicking sounds that their translators rendered as worried muttering. Even the normally confident Xanthari cadets seemed subdued, their scales shifting to muted colors. Instructor Veltar entered through the main door, his posture radiating satisfaction. Behind him came a team of containment specialists wheeling a large, reinforced transport cage. The cage was covered with a heavy tarp, but something inside was moving. "Cadets," Veltar announced, his voice carrying easily across the silent bay. "Today you will experience what your textbooks call extreme encounter protocols. Many of you have read about dangerous predators from Deathworlds. Today, you will meet one." Several cadets near the back started edging toward the exits, but the doors sealed with an audible click. Veltar's yellow eyes gleamed with anticipation. "The creature you are about to see is a Corvin Shadowstalker from the Deathworld of Corvin Prime. These beings are apex predators capable of psychic intimidation, adaptive camouflage, and lethal precision hunting. They have never been successfully tamed or controlled by any known species." Jake found himself leaning forward with interest. A psychic predator sounded fascinating. He had read about creatures with mental abilities but had never seen one in person. The purpose of this exercise, Veltar continued, is to teach you proper respect for true danger. Many of you, particularly our human cadets, have shown a concerning lack of appropriate fear responses. Today, that changes. The instructor signaled to the containment team, who began removing the tarp. As the covering fell away, gasps echoed throughout the chamber. The creature inside the cage was unlike anything most of the cadets had ever seen. It stood about 4 feet at the shoulder but stretched nearly 8 feet from nose to tail. Its body was sleek and muscular, covered in fur that seemed to shift colors even as they watched. 6 legs ending in razor-sharp claws supported its frame, and its head was distinctly feline but larger, with eyes that glowed with an inner light. But the most striking thing about the creature wasn't what they could see. It was what they could feel. A wave of psychic pressure rolled out from the cage, carrying with it primal fear and the absolute certainty of death. Most of the alien cadets immediately stepped back, several of them making distressed noises in their native languages. 3 Flixian students actually fainted and had to be caught by their neighbors. Jake felt the psychic wave wash over him and paused to analyze the sensation. It was definitely trying to make him afraid, but the feeling was artificial, like someone trying to convince him he was cold when he was standing in sunlight. His father had taught him that fear was an information system, and this information didn't match what his eyes and logical mind were telling him. The shadow stalker paced back and forth in its cage, its glowing eyes scanning the crowd of terrified cadets. When its gaze reached the cluster of aliens, they pressed back even further. But when those alien eyes met Jake's calm brown ones, something unexpected happened. The creature stopped pacing. For a long moment, human and alien predators studied each other across the space of the training bay. Jake tilted his head slightly, the same way he did when he was trying to figure out what was bothering one of the ranch horses. The shadow stalker mirrored the gesture, its psychic intimidation field, flickering with what almost seemed like confusion. Fascinating, Jake murmured, taking a step forward. Martinez, Veltar's voice cracked like a whip. Maintain your position. But Jake was already moving closer, his movements slow and deliberate. He had learned long ago that sudden motions scared animals, and despite its psychic abilities, this was clearly still an animal. The creature's body language spoke of intelligence, curiosity, and underneath it all, loneliness. Jake, what are you doing? Katie hissed from behind him. It's okay, Jake replied softly, not taking his eyes off the shadow stalker. Look at its posture. It's not really angry. It's confused. The containment specialists started to move toward Jake, but Veltar held up a hand to stop them. The instructor wanted to see what would happen when the arrogant human finally experienced real fear. Jake stopped about 10 feet from the cage and simply stood there, hands relaxed at his sides. The shadow stalker had stopped its psychic assault and was now studying him with what looked like genuine curiosity. Its head cocked to one side, ears pricked forward in the universal mammalian expression of interest. Hello there, Jake said, quietly, using the same calm tone he used with spooked cattle. You're pretty far from home, aren't you? The creature made a sound, not quite a growl but not quite a purr either. It was a questioning noise, the kind of sound an animal makes when it encounters something it doesn't understand but isn't immediately threatening. Behind Jake, the other cadets watched in stunned silence. The psychic pressure that had been overwhelming them moments before had completely disappeared. The shadow stalker seemed to have forgotten about intimidating prey and was now focused entirely on this strange, fearless biped who was talking to it like an old friend. That's what I thought, Jake continued, interpreting the creature's body language with the skill of someone who had spent his life reading animal behavior. You don't really want to hurt anyone. You're just scared and lonely. The shadow stalker took a step closer to the bars of its cage, still making that questioning sound. Its eyes, which had been glowing with predatory intensity, now seemed almost gentle. Veltar watched in complete bewilderment. This was not how the scenario was supposed to unfold. The human should be cowering in terror, finally understanding what real danger meant. Instead, he was having what looked like a conversation with one of the galaxy's most feared predators. Sir, one of the containment specialists whispered urgently, the creature's biometric readings are showing something we've never seen before. What? Veltar demanded, not taking his eyes off the impossible scene before him. It's relaxed, actually relaxed. Heart rate dropping, stress hormones decreasing. It's acting like it's found something it's been looking for. Jake reached slowly toward the cage, his hand extended palm up in the universal gesture of peaceful intent. The shadow stalker sniffed carefully at his fingers through the bars and then, to the amazement of everyone watching, it began to make a sound that was unmistakably a purr. There we go, Jake said softly, a smile spreading across his face. Good kitty. The training bay fell completely silent except for the deep, rumbling purr coming from the shadow stalker. Jake kept his hand extended toward the cage, letting the creature get used to his scent and presence. The alien predator sniffed at his fingers with obvious interest, its earlier aggression completely forgotten. This is impossible, whispered one of the containment specialists into his communicator. Shadow stalkers don't interact peacefully with other species, ever. Jake ignored the chatter around him and focused on the creature before him. Up close, he could see details that the terrified observers had missed. The shadow stalker's fur wasn't just changing colors randomly, it was responding to its emotional state, much like a chameleon. Right now, the aggressive dark patterns were fading to softer, warmer hues. You're not mean at all, are you? Jake said softly. You're just lonely. The creature pressed its nose against the bars of the cage, trying to get closer to Jake's outstretched hand. Its eyes, which had been glowing, with predatory intensity, now held an almost desperate hope. Jake recognized that look from dealing with abandoned animals on the ranch, creatures that had been alone too long and were starving for gentle contact. Behind him, Instructor Veltar stood frozen in confusion. His perfect plan to humble the arrogant humans was falling apart before his eyes. The deadly predator that should have sent them screaming was instead behaving like an oversized house cat seeking attention. Martinez, Veltar called out, his voice strained. Step away from the containment unit immediately. Jake glanced back at the instructor. It's okay, sir. She's not dangerous right now. Look at her body language. Ears forward, tail relaxed, pupils not dilated. She's curious, not aggressive. She? Katie asked, moving closer despite her own nervousness. Pretty sure, Jake replied, studying the creature's features. The bone structure around the face is more delicate than you'd expect in a male predator. Plus, she's being cautious rather than territorial. Males usually try to establish dominance right away. The shadow stalker made another questioning sound, this one softer and more plaintive. Jake recognized it immediately. It was the same kind of noise that abandoned calves made when they were looking for their mothers. Oh, sweetheart, Jake murmured, his voice full of sympathy. How long have you been alone? As if responding to his tone, the creature pressed even closer to the bars. Without thinking, Jake reached through the gaps in the cage and gently scratched behind one of her ear-like sensory organs. The purring immediately increased in volume and the shadow stalker's eyes half closed in obvious pleasure. A collective gasp went up from the watching cadets. Several alien students actually backed further away, as if expecting the creature to suddenly turn violent. But the shadow stalker just leaned into Jake's touch, making soft, contented sounds. This is unprecedented, the containment specialist was saying into his communicator. We need xenobiologist support immediately. The creature is exhibiting behaviors we've never documented. Jake continued his gentle scratching, expanding the area to include the creature's neck and shoulders. The shadow stalker arched into his touch like a giant cat, her purring growing even louder. Her fur had now settled into warm, golden tones that reminded Jake of sunset on the Montana plains. Jake, Katie said carefully, what exactly are you doing? Same thing I'd do with any scared animal, Jake replied without taking his eyes off the shadow stalker, letting her know she's safe. Look how she responds. She's been craving gentle contact. Shadow stalkers might be solitary hunters, but that doesn't mean they don't need social connection. Veltar finally found his voice. This behavior makes no sense. Shadow stalkers are apex predators. They kill without mercy. So do mountain lions, Jake said, now using both hands to pet the creature through the bars. But they're still cats. They still need affection and security, especially when they're stressed or displaced from their territory. The Shadow Stalker suddenly did something that made every alien in the room freeze in terror. She opened her mouth wide, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth designed for tearing flesh. Several cadets prepared to run, certain they were about to witness a gruesome attack. Instead, the creature gently took Jake's wrist in her mouth, being careful not to apply any pressure. It was the same kind of gentle mouth contact that wolves use to show affection to their packmates. "Good girl," Jake said approvingly, not showing the slightest concern about having his hand in the mouth of a legendary predator. "You're such a good girl." The Shadow Stalker released his hand and made a sound that was unmistakably pleased. She then began rubbing her head against the bars of the cage, clearly asking for more attention. Commander Roth chose that moment to enter the training bay. Drawn by the emergency alerts from the containment team, she took in the scene at a glance. The terrified alien cadets, the bewildered instructor, and Jake calmly petting a supposedly deadly predator like it was a friendly farm dog. "Martinez," she called out. "Status report." "All good, ma'am," Jake replied cheerfully, now scratching under the Shadow Stalker's chin. "Just making a new friend. I think she's been in isolation too long. Shadow Stalkers might be solitary hunters, but isolation and loneliness are different things." "The creature appears to have bonded with Cadet Martinez," one of the containment specialists reported to Commander Roth. "Its stress indicators are at the lowest levels we've ever recorded for this species." Roth studied the scene with professional interest. She had been expecting something like this ever since she learned about Veltar's plan. The instructor had made the classic mistake of assuming that human fear responses worked the same way as everyone else's. "Instructor Veltar," she said calmly, "I believe your exercise has been more educational than you intended." Veltar's scales had shifted to colors that Jake was pretty sure indicated embarrassment. This was not the expected outcome, the Zenthari admitted stiffly. The Shadow Stalker chose that moment to lie down on the floor of her cage, rolling slightly onto her side in a clear invitation for belly rubs. Jake obliged without hesitation, reaching through the bars to scratch her stomach. The creature's purring reached levels that were making the floor vibrate. "There's my brave kitty," Jake said affectionately, using the same tone he'd use with any beloved pet. "Such a good, brave kitty." The Shadow Stalker's tail began twitching with what was unmistakably happiness. Around the training bay, alien cadets stared in complete amazement at the sight of their classmate treating one of the galaxy's most feared predators like a house cat. And the most remarkable thing of all was that it seemed to be working perfectly. Word spread through the academy like wildfire. Within an hour, Training Bay 7 was packed with instructors, researchers, and curious cadets from every species on the station. They came to witness something that had never been recorded in galactic history: a peaceful interaction between a Corvan Shadow Stalker and any other sentient species. Jake remained by the cage, now sitting cross-legged on the floor with his arms through the bars, gently stroking the Shadow Stalker's massive head. The creature had positioned herself so she could maintain maximum contact with him, her eyes half closed in contentment. Her fur had settled into warm gold and amber patterns that pulsed gently with her breathing. "This is Dr. Kethtal from the Xenobiology Department," Commander Roth announced to the growing crowd. "He's here to observe and document what's happening." The elderly crystalline scientist approached cautiously, his internal light flickering with scientific excitement. "Remarkable. In 300 years of study, we have never seen a Shadow Stalker exhibit bonding behaviors with another species. May I ask what you're doing, Cadet Martinez?" "Just petting her," Jake replied simply, scratching behind the creature's ear. She was lonely and scared. All predators need reassurance sometimes. Dr. Kethtal began recording everything with multiple sensors. The creature's biochemistry has completely altered. Stress hormones are at baseline levels. Neural activity shows patterns associated with contentment and security. This challenges everything we thought we knew about this species. Instructor Veltar stood nearby, his scales cycling through colors that clearly indicated confusion and wounded pride. Commander Roth approached him with an expression that was both sympathetic and educational. "You wanted to teach the humans about fear. she said quietly. Instead, you've learned something about humans. I don't understand, Veltar admitted. That creature should terrify any rational being. Its psychic intimidation alone has hospitalized trained researchers. That's because you're thinking like a Zinthari, Roth explained. Your species evolved from prey animals that survive by recognizing and avoiding predators. Humans evolved differently. She gestured toward Jake, who was now showing the Shadow Stalker a simple hand game, hiding treats in his palms and letting her find them. The creature was playing along eagerly, her tail swishing with excitement. Humans are persistence hunters and pack cooperators, Roth continued. We survived not by running from predators, but by forming alliances with them. On Earth, humans live alongside creatures that would terrify most galactic species, such as, Dr. Kethtail asked, his scientific curiosity evident. Katie had been listening from nearby. My neighbor back home keeps wolves as pets. My uncle raises bears. Jake's family works with animals that weigh over a ton and could kill you by accident, just by stepping on you. The key difference, Commander Roth explained, is that humans don't see dangerous and evil as the same thing. A mountain lion is dangerous, but it's not malicious. It's just trying to survive. Once you understand what it needs and respect its nature, you can coexist. Jake demonstrated the point by standing up and moving to a different part of the cage. The Shadow Stalker immediately rose and followed him, pressing against the bars to maintain contact. Her movements were fluid and clearly predatory, but also gentle and controlled. Watch her body language, Jake called out to the assembled crowd. See how her ears are forward and her tail is relaxed? She's alert but not aggressive. She's treating this as play, not hunting. To demonstrate further, Jake began moving his hand in quick darting motions outside the cage. The Shadow Stalker immediately responded, tracking the movement with lightning-fast reflexes. But instead of striking with her claws, she gently tapped at his hand with her pads, careful not to extend her weapons. She's playing, Dr. Kethtal whispered in amazement. A Shadow Stalker is playing. Several alien cadets had begun taking notes, trying to understand how Jake was accomplishing something that violated everything they thought they knew about predator behavior. The secret, Jake explained, sensing their confusion, is that you have to stop thinking about what you want the animal to do and start thinking about what the animal needs. She needs social contact, mental stimulation, and reassurance that she's safe. As if to prove his point, the Shadow Stalker began making a new sound, a complex series of chirps and trills that their translators couldn't interpret. Jake listened carefully, then tried to approximate the sounds with his own voice. The creature responded immediately, chirping back in what was clearly a conversation. They're communicating, Dr. Kethtal said, his internal light flashing rapidly, with excitement. Cadet Martinez, you may have just made the most significant xenobiological discovery of the century. It's not that complicated, Jake replied, still focused on the Shadow Stalker. She's just trying to tell me about herself. All animals communicate if you know how to listen. Veltar finally approached the cage, his scales now showing colors. That Jake was learning indicated curiosity rather than aggression. How do you remain so calm? The psychic pressure should be overwhelming. What psychic pressure? Jake asked, genuinely. I mean, I can feel something, but it's not scary. It's more like she's trying to tell me how she feels. That's impossible, one of the containment specialists protested. Shadow Stalker psychic intimidation is designed to trigger fear responses in all mammalian species. Commander Roth smiled. All mammalian prey species. Humans aren't prey animals. Our brains process threat assessment differently. To demonstrate this point, Jake asked everyone to step back. Then he opened the cage. Gasps and cries of alarm echoed through the training. Several cadets ran for the exits. The containment specialists immediately raised their tranquilizer weapons. But the Shadow Stalker simply walked out of the cage and sat down next to Jake, leaning against his leg like an enormous cat seeking attention. She looked around at all, the frightened faces with what appeared to be confusion, then looked up at Jake as if asking why everyone was so upset. It's okay, girl, Jake said, scratching her neck. They're just not used to you yet. Dr. Kethatal approached slowly, his scientific instruments recording every detail. The creature shows no aggressive tendencies whatsoever. This contradicts decades of research. Maybe the research was wrong, Jake suggested. Maybe shadow stalkers only act aggressive when they feel threatened or trapped. Look at her now. She's curious about everyone but not hostile. The shadow stalker proved his point by approaching Dr. Kethtal slowly, sniffing at his crystalline form with obvious interest. When the scientist remained still, she gently touched his surface with her nose, then looked back at Jake as if asking for approval. She likes you, Jake told Dr. Kethtal. She's just saying hello. Around the training bay, the assembled crowd watched in amazement as one of the galaxy's most feared predators behaved like a friendly, intelligent pet. The implications were staggering, and everyone present knew they were witnessing history. But, for Jake, it was just another day of making friends with an animal that needed understanding, rather than fear. The peaceful scene in Training Bay 7 was suddenly disrupted by the arrival of a full containment response team. Armed with heavy tranquilizer weapons and protective gear, they burst through the main doors expecting to find chaos and carnage. Instead, they found Jake sitting on the floor with the shadow stalker lying beside him like a giant pet, her head resting in his lap, while he scratched behind her ears. Emergency response team reporting, the team leader announced through his helmet speaker. We're here to recontain the loose shadow stalker. The shadow stalker lifted her head and looked at the armed team with obvious alarm. Her fur began shifting to darker, more aggressive patterns, and a low growl rumbled from her chest. Jake immediately felt the change in her posture and placed a calming hand on her neck. It's okay, girl, he said softly. They're not going to hurt you. But the creature's distress was increasing. Her psychic field flared to life, sending waves of intimidation that had most of the response team stumbling backward in fear. The shadow stalker rose to her feet, placing herself protectively between Jake and the armed figures. Stand down, Commander Roth ordered the response team. Lower your weapons immediately. Ma'am, protocol requires immediate containment of any escaped predator, the team leader replied, though his voice shook from the psychic pressure. The shadow stalker's growl deepened and Jake could see her muscles tensing for action. She wasn't being aggressive toward him, but she clearly viewed the armed team as a threat to her new friend. Her protective instincts were kicking in, and Jake realized the situation could turn dangerous very quickly. Everyone needs to stay calm, Jake said, rising slowly to his feet. The shadow stalker moved with him, staying close to his side. She's not going to attack anyone unless she thinks I'm in danger. Martinez, Veltar called out urgently. Step away from the creature so we can handle this safely. No, Jake replied firmly. If I move away, she'll think you're separating us and get more upset. The only way this ends peacefully is if everyone puts their weapons down and stops acting like a threat. The team leader looked to Commander Roth for guidance. The shadow stalker's psychic field was now strong enough that several of the response team members were visibly struggling to maintain their positions. You heard the cadet, Roth commanded. Lower all weapons and remove your helmets. Move slowly and keep your hands visible. Ma'am, that's against every safety protocol we have. Those protocols were written by people who didn't understand what they were dealing with, Roth replied. Do it now, or this situation gets much worse. Reluctantly, the response team began complying. As their weapons lowered and their helmets came off, the shadow stalker's aggressive posture began to relax. Her fur shifted back to the warmer color she had displayed earlier, and her psychic field diminished to barely noticeable levels. That's better, Jake said, gently stroking the creature's flank. See, they're not enemies. They're just doing their job. Dr. Kethtal approached carefully, his scientific instrument still recording. Fascinating. The creature's protective response is remarkably similar to pack bonding behaviors seen in social predators. She thinks of me as family now, Jake explained. That's how it works with social animals. Once you're accepted into the group, they'll protect you with their lives. Instructor Veltar stepped forward, his scales showing colors of genuine curiosity rather than confrontation. Cadet Martinez, I owe you an apology. I wanted to teach you about fear and respect, but instead, you have taught me something far more valuable. What's that, sir? That courage and foolishness are not the same thing, Veltar replied. What you did here required genuine bravery, but it was based on knowledge and understanding, not reckless disregard for danger. The Shadow Stalker had been listening to the conversation, her head moving back and forth between speakers as if following the discussion. Now she approached Veltar slowly, sniffing at his scaled skin with obvious interest. She wants to meet you properly, Jake interpreted. Just stand still and let her get your scent. Don't make any sudden movements. Veltar remained motionless as the massive predator investigated him. After a moment, the Shadow Stalker made a soft, chittering sound and gently head-butted the instructor's leg, the same greeting she had given Dr. Kethtel earlier. Remarkable, Veltar whispered. She shows no aggression at all. Why would she? Jake asked. You're not threatening her or trying to separate her from her pack. As far as she's concerned, you're just another potential friend. Commander Roth cleared her throat, drawing everyone's attention. We need to discuss what happens next. Obviously, returning her to isolation containment is no longer an option. The Shadow Stalker seemed to understand the implication. She moved closer to Jake and made a series of worried sounds, her fur shifting to more anxious patterns. It's okay, Jake assured her. Nobody's going to lock you up again. But we can't simply release a Shadow Stalker into the general population, Dr. Kethtel pointed out. Despite her current docile behavior, she's still an apex predator. Jake thought for a moment, then looked at Commander Roth. What if she became part of the training program? Not as something to be afraid of, but as a teaching partner. She could help cadets learn about interspecies communication and cooperation. That's an unprecedented suggestion, Roth replied thoughtfully. So was everything else that happened today, Jake pointed out. Veltar stepped forward, his decision already made. I support Cadet Martinez's proposal. Today has shown me that we have been teaching our cadets to fear what they do not understand, rather than teaching them to understand what they fear. Dr. Kethtel's internal light flickered with excitement. From a research perspective, the opportunity to study ongoing interspecies cooperation would be invaluable. Very well, Commander Roth decided. The Shadow Stalker will be assigned to advanced training exercises with Cadet Martinez as her primary handler. This arrangement will be evaluated monthly for safety and effectiveness. The Shadow Stalker seemed to sense that something positive had been decided. Her fur settled into contented gold patterns, and she began purring loud enough for everyone in the bay to hear. 3 weeks later, Jake stood in front of a mixed class of alien and human cadets with the Shadow Stalker, now officially nicknamed Duchess by Katie, demonstrating hunting techniques and predator behavior. The alien students were no longer terrified of her. Instead, they watched with fascination as Jake explained predator psychology and interspecies communication. The key thing to remember, Jake was saying as Duchess performed a perfect stalking approach on a training dummy, is that predators aren't monsters. They're intelligent beings with their own needs, fears, and desires. Once you understand what motivates them, you can work with them instead of against them. Duchess completed her demonstration and returned to Jake's side, accepting the ear scratches that had become their standard reward system. Several alien cadets raised their hands with questions about predator behavior and communication techniques. In the observation booth above, Instructor Veltar watched the lesson with satisfaction. He had learned more about courage, wisdom, and leadership in the past month than in all his years of military service. The humans hadn't just taught him about their own species, they had opened his eyes to possibilities he had never imagined. Still thinking about requesting a transfer back to the Empire? Commander Roth asked, joining him at the observation window. No, Veltar replied, his scales showing colors of deep contentment. I think I'll stay here. It seems I still have much to learn. Below them, Jake was explaining to a young Avirian cadet that fear was just information, and that the key to dealing with any dangerous situation was staying calm and thinking clearly. Duchess demonstrated by allowing the cadet to approach and gently touch her fur, proving that even the most feared predators could become partners when treated with understanding and respect. As Jake had learned long ago on the ranch, most problems, could be solved once you figured out what everyone needed and found a way to work together. It turned out that principle worked just as well in space as it did back home in Montana.